When you turn off the lights tonight and the house settles, your brain is going to do something incredible.
Oh, absolutely. It's a universal experience.
Right. You know the exact moment you're standing in the hallway or maybe at the base of the stairs. The wood creaks, the refrigerator compressor kicks off, and suddenly the silence in your home just feels heavy.
Like a physical weight.
Exactly. Your eyes haven't quite adjusted to the dark yet, and the shadows in the corners of the room seem almost like thick. And if you hear a floorboard groan in that exact moment, your brain will actually burn more energy trying to imagine what made that sound than it would if an actual physical intruder jumped out in front of you.
Which is wild to think about biologically.
It really is. Most people, when they feel that sudden irrational drop in their stomach, they just hurry up the stairs, they get under the covers, they completely avoid the dark. But today, you and I, we are intentionally walking right into it.
We are stepping straight into the shadows, and we are doing it to map the architecture of that exact feeling.
Yeah, we have a massive stack of sources to guide us through the dark today. We are pulling from academic research out of Estonia detailing the neurobiology of fear and how our brains process scary movies versus scary stories.
That study is fascinating.
It really is. We are also digging into Reddit discussions about people who bizarrely use horror accounts to fall asleep.
Which makes no sense on the surface.
Right. And we're looking at YouTube tutorials on how people are using artificial intelligence to mass-produce terror for profit. And to anchor all of this, we have a collection of visceral, highly specific, and allegedly true survival accounts.
Our mission today goes far beyond just recounting spooky stories or, analyzing the mechanics of a cheap jump scare. We are embarking on a calculated exploration of why narrated horror triggers such intense, sustained physiological dread.
Yeah, we are going to utilize 4 highly specific, emotionally charged accounts from our sources. Think of them as stress tests for your psychological limits.
And as we walk through these narratives, we aren't just going to look at what happens. We are going to dissect the anatomy of the nightmare itself.
Exactly. We're going to understand how a story whispered into your ear bypasses the highly evolved logical parts of your brain and taps directly into the ancient primal survival instincts that kept our ancestors alive in the wilderness.
Which means we will be heavily analyzing cognitive dissonance, the collapse of perceived safety, and the literal physiological tracking your body undergoes when it believes it is being hunted.
So let's start with the science of the unseen. To understand why a shadow in your hallway is so terrifying, we really have to look at this fascinating study from film researchers in Estonia.
Right, the neurocinematics paper.
Yeah, they've been looking at how audiences react to horror. And the core of their finding is that showing a monster is fundamentally neurologically different from having a character simply narrate a scary event.
The researchers draw a line straight back to our evolutionary roots. I mean, throughout human history, long before the printing press or the cinema, we orally shared stories around campfires.
Cautionary tale.
Exactly. Survival accounts. The act of sitting in the dark and listening to someone describe a threat is baked deeply into our DNA. Modern horror relies heavily on visual spectacle, but the researchers highlight a brilliant counterexample, which is Steven Spielberg's 1975 film, Jaws.
Oh, that's such a perfect example. Specifically, the scene where the old sailor, Quint, is sitting in the cabin of the boat at night, describing his first encounter with deadly sharks after the sinking of the USS Indianapolis.
And the thing is, there is no shark on the screen during that monologue.
Not a single one.
It's literally just a man telling a story in a dimly lit room. Yet it builds this creeping dread, a profound apprehension that a sudden visual jump scare simply cannot replicate.
And these Estonian researchers aren't just guessing about this feeling, right? They hook their test subjects up to fMRI machines and electroencephalograms.
Right, getting the actual hard data.
Yeah. And for anyone unfamiliar, an fMRI is essentially a real-time heat map of where blood is flowing in your brain, showing which areas are working the hardest. Electroencephalograms measure the actual electrical crackle of your neurons firing.
They even tracked skin fluctuations.
Oh, yeah, the microscopic sweat responses.
Exactly, and measured heart rates. And what they proved is that the human brain actually works significantly harder and panics on a much deeper, more systemic level when it is forced to visualize narrated horror.
So consider the mechanics of a jump scare. When you see a monster jump out on a screen, the visual cortex processes an image. The threat is immediately defined. It has edges, it has a shape, a specific location.
Your brain's amygdala, which is basically the raw alarm bell, registers the threat. You get a quick, sharp spike of adrenaline, you flinch, and then
It's over.
it's over. Your prefrontal cortex, the logical center, quickly catches up and says, oh, it's just a screen, we are safe. The physical response cools down really rapidly.
But when you remove the visual proof,
That's when the dynamic changes completely. You are forcing the brain to constantly render the danger.
a graphics card.
Yes, the visual cortex is burning immense amounts of energy trying to build the monster in your own mind, based entirely on the audio cues. It is acting like a computer graphics card pushed to its absolute limit. And because the brain is building the threat itself, it tailors the terror specifically to your own deepest subconscious fears.
Which is terrifying.
The cognitive load is immense. The threat is everywhere and nowhere. And the physiological response, that sustained, suffocating dread, is profound because the prefrontal cortex cannot confirm that the area is clear.
Well, to test this Estonian theory of visualized dread, I want to immerse you in our first narrative from the sources. We'll call this one The Violated Sanctuary.
This one is intense.
It really is. I want you to truly picture the setup. Feel the environment. You are a remote worker. It is the dead of July. A major electrical issue has blown the transformer at your house, leaving you without central air or power for days.
It's a miserable situation.
Right. And you are on a tight deadline. You have to keep working, so you desperately search for an Airbnb. But because you live in a smaller city and it's the middle of summer, options are incredibly sparse.
So the baseline of vulnerability is already being established here. You are displaced. You are physically isolated from your normal environment and your support systems.
Exactly. The only affordable place you can find is a 45-minute drive away, situated in a secluded, much rougher part of town. The property backs right up to a dense, overgrown patch of woods.
Classic horror setup.
Yeah. You arrive late in the afternoon. The house is old, musty, and stiflingly hot. You're exhausted from dealing with the power outage, so you just drop your bags and go straight to sleep.
And you have to remember, you are sleeping in a space that your brain has not had time to fully map or claim as safe territory. You are in an area you already perceive as slightly threatening.
Right. So the next morning, you wake up early. You find a cheap particle board desk in the living room and begin to set up your laptop. Before you even have a chance to log in, there's a heavy knock at the front door.
Which is startling.
Very. You freeze. You debate opening it. I mean, it's not your house. You aren't expecting anyone. You creep over and peek through the blinds on the porch window. Standing there is a man, maybe early 30s. He is covered in harsh, faded tattoos.
Definitely not what you expect to see.
No. He doesn't look like an Airbnb host. He certainly doesn't look like a salesman. He is just standing there staring blankly at the door. You decide to hold your breath and ignore him. Eventually, he turns and walks away.
Crisis averted, supposedly.
Right. You let out a sigh, walk back to the desk, and dive into your work. You are catching up on days of missed meetings. You don't leave that desk until 8 p.m. You run out for a quick fast food dinner, come back and sit down at the kitchen table to eat, and then another knock at the door.
Notice the escalation of the pattern here. The threat has returned. It has established a fixation on this specific location, testing the perimeter.
You check the door again. It's the exact same tattooed man. This time he seems slightly more agitated. You're more irritated than concerned now, so you ignore him again. He eventually leaves.
Which is a normal reaction, honestly.
Yeah, you just want to get your work done. You finish eating, and around 10 p.m. you realize you need to work for one more hour to knock out the absolute last of your tasks. Here is where the atmosphere in the house drastically shifts. You go back to the desk. To help you focus, you put your noise-canceling headphones in.
Oh, no.
Yeah. You are blasting music, completely blocking out the ambient noise of the old house. No creaking pipes, no wind outside, just the music. You are staring intently at the bright blue-white glare of your laptop screen. For a solid hour, you are completely immersed in spreadsheets and emails.
Think about the sensory deprivation occurring here.
It's total.
By putting in noise-canceling headphones, you have entirely eliminated your early warning auditory system. By staring at a bright light source in a dark room, your pupils have constricted, effectively blinding your peripheral vision to the surrounding darkness. You have placed yourself in a state of absolute sensory isolation regarding your immediate physical environment.
So finally, you hit send on the last email. You pull out your headphones. You close the laptop. And in that instant, you realize how incredibly, suffocatingly dark the house has gotten. The sun went down hours ago, and your laptop screen was the only light source in the entire house.
The contrast must have been jarring.
Totally. You stand up in the pitch black. Your eyes are swimming with after images from the screen. You feel your way blindly to the front hallway, your hands sliding along the wallpaper until you find the switch.
The vulnerability here is off the chart.
Yeah. You flip on the overhead light. The bulb flickers, hums, and casts a harsh yellow glow. And as the light hits the floor, a violent physical chill rushes through your entire body. Down the front hallway, stark against the dusty hardwood floor, are faint but unmistakable shoe prints.
This is the exact moment the Estonia study is talking about. This is the neurocinematic spike, the realization of the unseen.
The prints are slightly wet, or maybe caked in fine dust, but they are absolutely there. And as you trace them with your eyes, panic seizing your chest, you see that they are meandering. They go down the hall, they wander into the kitchen, and then your heart completely stops.
Because of where they end up.
Exactly. The shoe prints track right out of the kitchen, across the rug, and stop directly behind the back of the desk chair you were just sitting in for the last hour.
The implications of that spatial geography are devastating to the human brain.
You follow the prints with your eyes, paralyzed by terror. They lead from the back of your chair toward the back door of the house, which you now see is cracked wide open, letting in the humid night air. Pure, freezing horror washes over you. You are sitting there, deafened by your headphones, blinded by the screen, where someone stood silently directly behind your neck.
Just watching you.
Yes. And then a sound breaks the silence. Footsteps, starting to come down the wooden stairs from the second floor. Slow, careful, methodical. Someone is still in the house.
Your brain is screaming at this point.
They reach the bottom step, and a man peers out into the hallway, looking directly at you. It is the tattooed man from the porch. And here is the worst part, the detail that makes your blood run cold. He looks genuinely surprised to see you walking around.
Because he thought you were still at the desk.
Exactly. But that surprise quickly morphs into pure, unadulterated rage. His face twists with intense irritation. You try to scream, but your vocal cords are completely frozen. Your heart is hammering so hard it hurts your ribs.
The fight-or-flight response has totally hijacked your system.
Survival instinct takes over. You turn, you sprint out the cracked back door, and you run blindly into the dark woods behind the house. You dive behind a thick oak tree, scraping your face on the bark, pulling out your phone with shaking hands to dial 911. And as the screen lights up, you hear the heavy, frantic footsteps of the man chasing you, sprinting past your hiding spot into the deep darkness, searching for you.
It's a staggering, breathless sequence of events. And just to close the loop on the reality of that source material, the police ultimately catch the man the next day. He was identified easily by the tattoos. Law enforcement confirmed he had been actively breaking into homes in that specific secluded area, doing, as the source states, horrible things to the residents.
So, you know the concept of negative space in art, right? Where the empty space around the subject forms the actual image.
Yeah, of course.
This story feels like the absolute embodiment of negative space in horror. The terror isn't just the tattooed man standing at the bottom of the stairs. The mind-breaking horror is the shoe prints revealing that he was standing silently behind you while you were typing.
Right, the realization of what you didn't see.
Exactly. The horror is what already happened without you knowing. Why is a retroactive threat, a danger that occurred in the past tense, so paralyzing to the human mind?
The negative space analogy is perfect. To understand why a retroactive threat is so paralyzing, we really have to look at the brain's threat detection software, which relies entirely on a baseline of perceived safety.
Okay, a baseline.
Yeah, when you are inside a locked house, your brain categorizes that space as a sanctuary. It actively powers down the hypervigilance required for survival in the wild. It tells your adrenal glands to relax. When you turn on the light and see the footprints directly behind your chair, the brain instantly realizes that its sanctuary baseline was a complete catastrophic lie.
The safety was an illusion the whole time.
Precisely. It means your internal alarm system fundamentally failed. You were in mortal, immediate danger for an extended period of time, and your senses did not warn you. The freezing of the vocal cords, the immense spike in heart rate you experience upon seeing the footprints, that isn't just a fear of the man on the stairs.
Deeper than that.
Much deeper. It is the existential shock of system failure. The retroactive realization forces the brain to wildly, desperately reevaluate every shadow, every sound, because it knows it can no longer trust its own environmental assessment.
Wow.
The violated sanctuary is terrifying because it means nowhere is safe. If you can be hunted in your own locked living room while listening to music, the boundaries of safety do not exist.
Which brings us to a massive psychological contradiction. If a violated sanctuary is that deeply terrifying, If the collapse of our safety baseline is that traumatic, why do we seek it out?
It is a paradox, for sure.
I want to pull from our Reddit sources here because we found entire communities of people discussing an incredibly bizarre phenomenon. There are hundreds of thousands of people who listen to YouTube horror channels, channels like Dark Somnia, Mr. Nightmare. Let's read specifically to fall asleep.
Which just sounds insane.
Right. They are putting on their headphones, laying in the dark, and using hours-long narrated stories of stalking, home invasions, and deep woods dread as literal lullabies.
It seems entirely counterintuitive on the surface. You are taking adrenaline-inducing narratives designed to trigger the sympathetic nervous system's fight-or-flight response and using them as a sleep aid.
It makes no logical sense. I mean, why would anyone willingly invite a home invader or a stalker into their bedroom right as they are closing their eyes and at their most vulnerable?
Well, it goes deeper than just enjoying a spooky story. Listening to narrated horror provides a highly structured, highly controlled environment for anxiety.
Controlled anxiety.
Exactly. Think about the modern world. We are constantly bombarded by abstract, chronic stressors. You have financial worries, social anxieties, career pressures, the 24/7 news cycle. These are amorphous threats. They have no clear edges, no clear resolution.
So the anxiety just hums in the background, keeping you awake.
Yes. Your brain is constantly simmering in low-level anxiety, but there is no monster to fight. But a horror story. A horror story is a tangible, highly defined threat with a beginning, a middle, and an end.
It gives the anxiety a shape.
Precisely. It allows the brain to process fear with a safety net. It mimics the evolutionary function of those campfire stories from the Estonian research. By listening to the story, you are experiencing the physiological thrill of the hunt. Your heart rate might elevate slightly, your brain is engaged in tracking the predator, but crucially, your conscious mind knows you are wrapped in a heavy blanket, completely safe in your own bed.
It's almost like a pressure valve.
It is a form of exposure therapy. The abstract anxieties of your day are replaced by the hyper-specific anxiety of the story. The stress spikes, it peaks during the climax of the narrative, and then as the story concludes or the protagonist escapes, the adrenaline washes away.
The threat is resolved.
And this leaves a profound sense of physiological relief that actually facilitates the transition into sleep. It exhausts the stress response.
Okay, let's test the durability of that safety net. Because our next narrative is designed to explicitly weaponize the logic our brains rely on to feel safe. We'll call this one the decoy trap.
This is where things get really uncomfortable.
Let's head deep into the woods. Picture two college friends, our narrator and his buddy Chris. They're avid hikers, and they decide to go backpacking deep into the dense forests of a small rural town. Their goal is to find a supposedly abandoned community they heard rumors about.
People always going where they shouldn't?
Naturally. So they park their car, hike for 30 minutes down a main well-marked trail, and then push off the path entirely, hacking through thick brush for another solid hour on a faint, almost invisible footpath, going incredibly deep into the trees.
They are systematically isolating themselves. They are moving far beyond the reach of cellular service, immediate help, or the safety of civilization.
The canopy above them is thick, blocking out most of the late afternoon sun. Eventually, the tree line suddenly breaks. They step into a clearing, and they find the houses. But immediately, the anomaly of the scene hits them.
It's not what they were expecting.
Not at all. These aren't ancient, rotting log cabins or historical ruins. These houses have modern vinyl siding. They have asphalt shingles. There are tiny gravel roads leading to concrete driveways. They look like normal middle-class suburban houses. But they are deeply weathered, the windows are dark, and the yards are wildly overgrown with chest-high weeds.
That is just deeply unsettling.
It looks like a modern subdivision was dropped from the sky into the deep woods and then just left to rot.
The visual data the brain is receiving here is immediately jarring. It violates the expected aesthetic of deep wilderness. Finding a modern ruin implies a sudden, unexplained evacuation or a catastrophic failure of a community.
Something bad happened.
It signals that whatever happened here was powerful enough to displace modern people.
So, Chris and the narrator walk up the cracked driveway to the first house. Thick weeds are growing right through the floorboards of the open front doorway. The door itself is hanging off its hinges. They stand on the porch, peering into the gloom. And before they even step inside, a massive, violently loud slamming sound echoes through the woods.
Oh, that's a huge red flag.
It sounds like a heavy wooden door being slammed shut somewhere deep in the trees. They both jump, their hearts leaping into their throats. They stare down the overgrown gravel road, straining to see. Nothing moves. The wind rustles the leaves, and then absolute silence returns.
Which is almost worse than the sound.
Right. Unnerved, but driven by that morbid human curiosity, they decide to go inside anyway.
They are actively ignoring a massive auditory warning sign.
They step into the living room. The floorboards groan under their boots. They explore the first floor, whispering to each other, trying to figure out why such a nice house was abandoned. They find nothing but dust and old debris. Then they head up the narrow, carpeted staircase.
Getting deeper into the trap.
And oddly, it is unnaturally dark on the second floor. Most of the windows have been boarded up from the inside, letting in only thin slivers of gray light. There's a short hallway at the top of the stairs with 2 closed doors and a square attic hatch in the ceiling.
This is a terrible tactical position.
They open the first door on the left. It's an empty master bedroom. But as they stand in the dark of that room, looking around, they are interrupted.
The environment is rapidly shifting from a space of exploration into a confined trap. The loss of ambient light and the single point of exit the stairs is a critical tactical escalation.
Downstairs, outside the front of the house, they hear a sound, shuffling. The distinct sound of heavy boots dragging through the tall, dry grass approaching the front porch.
Someone is there.
The boys freeze instantly in the dark upstairs bedroom. They look at each other, eyes wide. They know that whoever is walking through that grass must have seen them walk into the house. The footsteps slowly climb the wooden stairs to the front porch and stop right at the open doorway. A voice calls out into the house, "Hello!"
Shivers.
The boys hold their breath. They don't respond. The voice comes again. It's an older man. He is stumbling over his words, his speech slurred, sounding like he might be missing several teeth. "I just want to talk. No harm at all."
In an isolated, high-tension environment, a verbal assurance of no harm is actually deeply alarming.
Why is it that?
It is the behavior of a predator mimicking non-threatening social norms to draw prey out into the open. It's camouflage.
And then comes the most agonizing part of the entire ordeal. After that sentence, there is a full minute of absolute dead silence. The man at the door doesn't say another word, but the boys don't hear the sound of his boots walking away through the grass either.
Just total suspension of action.
They wait in the dark bedroom, sweat dripping down their faces, barely breathing for what feels like an eternity. Finally, the tension is too much. Chris slowly creeps out of the room. He sneaks on his tiptoes down the dark staircase, pausing on every step so the wood doesn't creak, and peers over the railing at the front door. He looks back up the stairs at the narrator. His face is completely pale in the gloom. He whispers, "There's nobody there. The doorway is empty." The tension here relies entirely on the unseen. The threat has vanished from the expected location. The narrator creeps down the stairs to join Chris. They stand together at the open front doorway, looking out into the overgrown yard. The man is gone. But here is the detail that shatters everything.
Here we go.
The grass in the front yard is tall and thick with evening dew. In that grass, there is one clear, unmistakable line of disturbed, flattened footprints coming from the tree line, leading directly to the front step of the house.
Okay.
There are 0 footprints leaving. The grass heading away from the porch is completely untouched.
The map doesn't work.
Exactly. The realization hits both of them simultaneously, like a physical blow to the stomach. The man never left the porch. He walked silently inside while they were hiding. He is hiding somewhere inside the dark house with them right now.
Oh, that is terrifying.
Maybe in the kitchen, maybe waiting at the bottom of the attic hatch. They don't look behind them, they bolt. They run full speed, leaping off the porch, crashing blindly through the woods for over an hour, tearing their clothes on thorns until they finally make it back to their car.
It is a stunning, terrifying realization of extreme proximity.
So let's pause and really look at this. Because for the Reddit users who are supposedly falling asleep to this kind of content, I have to ask, where is the comfort here? The discovery of that one set of footprints isn't a soothing narrative resolution.
No, not at all.
It isn't the monster being defeated. It's a terrifying puzzle that forces your brain to wake up, do the math, and scream, RN. How does the math of survival failing help anyone sleep?
This scenario represents the absolute uncanny valley of logic, and it's a profound test of our evolutionary biology. The human brain is, fundamentally, a pattern recognition machine. It is the primary tool that kept early humans alive.
We look for patterns.
Always.
Oh.
We see a footprint in the mud, we assume a foot made it. We see animal tracks approaching a watering hole, we expect to see tracks leaving a watering hole. When that foundational pattern is violently broken, when there are approaching tracks with absolutely no retreating tracks, it creates massive cognitive dissonance.
Because 1 + 1 suddenly equals death.
That's a great way to frame it. The brain cannot reconcile the physical evidence of the grass with a safe outcome. It forces the sudden, horrifying aha realization that a predator is hidden in the immediate vicinity. And for the listener laying in bed in the dark, they get the intense dopamine and adrenaline thrill of solving that survival puzzle. They realize the man is inside the house right alongside the characters in the story. They get the visceral rush of the realization, the intense hit of the run instinct, but they get to experience that entire cycle from the absolute safety of their pillows.
Wow.
They are practicing survival pattern recognition, pushing their brains to solve life or death math in a zero-stakes environment. It's a neurological workout. The brain solves the puzzle, floods the system with stress hormones, and then realizing the physical body is actually safe in bed allows the exhaustion of that spike to pull them into sleep.
But that entirely relies on the listener feeling like they have a grasp on the logic of the situation. Footprints mean a person. Hidden people mean danger. But what happens when the rules of survival, the very patterns you rely on, are explicitly laid out for you by an authority figure and then actively weaponized against you?
That entirely changes the game.
Because if a violated sanctuary is bad and a decoy trap in the woods is worse, being handed a map that tells you exactly where the monsters are is absolute psychological torture. Let's move to our third narrative. We'll call this one The Illusion of Control and Dead Blue.
This narrative fundamentally alters the contract between the environment and the victim. It takes the concept of logic and uses it to prove that logic is useless.
Here is the incredibly claustrophobic setup. A young man, maybe late teens, is accompanying his father on a night shift. His father is a veteran park ranger in a massive, sprawling, deeply isolated national park. The father's post for the night is a tiny, cramped wooden cabin.
Out in the middle of nowhere.
But it's not on the ground. It is built on massive wooden stilts, suspended 10 meters over 30 feet in the air, deep in the thickest part of the wilderness.
Which creates a false sense of security.
The father drives him out there in a rugged Jeep, cutting through the pitch black of the forest canopy. They target the base of the stilts, and before they even begin to climb the long wooden ladder up into the cabin, the father stops his son. He reaches into his jacket and hands him a crumpled, heavily worn, handwritten list of rules.
The immediate introduction of rules changes the psychological landscape before they even enter the space.
The father looks his son dead in the eye and tells him, with absolute gravity, that these aren't jokes. He must memorize them. The son reads them under the beam of a flashlight. Some seem perfectly normal for a ranger station. Don't leave food out on the counter. Keep the trapdoor locked. But then the rules take a sharp, deeply disturbing turn.
They stop making normal sense.
Listen to these specific rules from the source text. Rule 5. If you see a man without an arm, do not help him. Look away immediately.
Unsettling.
Rule 6. Your family is not here. There is absolutely no reason to hear their voices coming from outside.
That one is chilling.
Rule 9. If you hear whistling and it sounds near, they are far away. If the whistling sounds far away, they are right next to you. And Rule 10. Beware of dead blue.
The psychological architecture of a list like this is fascinating. The father actually provides a quote in this narrative that is profoundly insightful regarding human nature. He tells his son, "National parks are an illusion of being in control."
An illusion of control.
Think about that. Humans pave roads through ancient forests. We build observation cabins on massive stilts. We paint brightly colored markers on trees, and we draw maps. We do this to lie to ourselves. We try to impose order on a chaotic, ancient apex environment. These bizarre rules are the father acknowledging that the order is just a thin, fragile veneer.
It's like we're given a map to safely navigate a minefield. You think holding a map makes you safe, but the map itself is terrifying because it is indisputable, documented proof that the mines exist.
Exactly.
You wouldn't need a highly specific rule warning you about a man missing an arm unless something out there is actively mimicking a man missing an arm to hunt people.
If we connect this back to the Estonia research regarding ancient oral storytelling around campfires, these rules aren't just spooky internet tropes designed for a quick scare. They represent the modern evolution of human folklore.
How so?
For thousands of years, early humans used hyper-specific, terrifying rules to teach survival to the next generation. Don't eat the red berries with the black spots. Don't go near the still water when the sun goes down. Don't follow the sound of a crying baby in the deep woods. Here, the folklore has evolved for the modern mind, weaponizing our reliance on logic and documentation.
And the son's reliance on logic is tested almost immediately. Once they are up in the cabin, the father receives a radio call. He has to leave with his coworker, another ranger named Martin, to check on a distressed camper miles away.
So he's left alone.
The father looks at his son, tells him to lock the heavy wooden trapdoor in the floor, turn off all the lights, and wait. He climbs down the ladder, and the Jeep drives off. The son is completely alone, suspended 30 feet in the air, swallowed entirely by the dark forest. The wind is howling around the wooden walls. Hours pass. At 2 a.m., a heavy, deliberate knock echoes from the trapdoor in the floorboards, right under the son's boots.
The isolation is absolute, and the perceived sanctuary of the elevated cabin is immediately challenged.
The son freezes in his chair. He stares at the trapdoor. And then he hears his father's voice filtering up through the thick wood. "Kev, open the door, it's freezing out here."
But Rule 6.
The son's mind races. The voice sounds exactly like his dad. The inflection, the exhaustion, and the tone. But he remembers Rule 6. Your family is not here. There's no reason to hear their voices from outside. His logic fights his instinct. He crawls to the trapdoor and asks, "Dad, how did you get back here without Martin's Jeep? I didn't hear an engine."
Good, he's testing it.
The voice outside hesitates, then gives a flimsy, vague excuse about walking back. Panicking, his hands shaking, the son pulls out his cell phone and dials his father's number.
This is a brilliant modern detail. He is using technology to verify the biological impossibility of the threat at his door.
The phone rings, and his real father answers. He is miles away, in the Jeep with Martin. The son whispers into the receiver, "Dad, someone is under the cabin. Someone out there is pretending to be you."
Just imagine being the father in that situation.
The real father's voice instantly drops into a state of sheer panic. He tells his son to stay perfectly quiet, to absolutely not talk to it, and that they are turning the Jeep around right now. Meanwhile, the voice under the floorboards changes tactics. It starts begging. It starts crying, pleading to be let in, using the son's childhood nicknames.
Manipulating human empathy.
And then, suddenly, it just stops. Mid-sentence, absolute silence. But the terror is just escalating, because a moment later, heavy, thudding footsteps hit the roof of the cabin.
Remember the spatial geography we established. The cabin is suspended on stilts, over 30 feet in the air.
The entity is climbing the sheer outside walls of the cabin with impossible speed. The son is backed into a corner, staring up at the ceiling. And then, the climax of the siege. A face appears at the single pane of glass in the window.
At 30 feet up.
The son is staring at the window, and his father's face is looking back at him from the blackness outside. Nothing human could be standing at that window. There is no balcony. It's a 30-foot drop. It is physically impossible.
A total break in reality.
The entity wearing his father's face stares at him with dead, unblinking eyes. Thick, dark blood begins to drip slowly from one of its nostrils, and then it raises its pale hands. It hooks its long fingers into the corners of his own mouth and violently physically pulls its own cheeks upward into a grotesque, impossibly wide, unnatural smile.
It's just horrifying.
It holds that horrific expression for a second and then drops backward into the darkness, vanishing.
The mimicking of human emotion. The forced physical manipulation of the face to create a smile is the ultimate uncanny valley. It is a predator wearing the skin of prey, actively mocking the prey's biology. It shows an understanding of human connection and a desire to pervert it.
The real father arrives 10 minutes later, the Jeep tearing into the clearing. The son unlocks the trapdoor, they scramble down the long ladder in the dark and rush toward the vehicle. And as they are running across the dirt, the son realizes something horrifying about the environment around them.
Rule 10.
The wind, which had been howling all night, has completely stopped. The crickets, which were chirping constantly, are dead silent. The rustling of the leaves in the massive trees has ceased. It is absolute, total, suffocating, heavy silence. It is Rule 10. It is dead blue.
The absence of nature.
The son panics completely. He jumps into the driver's seat of the Jeep. He looks up and sees an entity standing in the dirt road in front of the car, an entity that looks exactly like his father standing next to him. Screaming, the son slams his foot on the gas, hits the entity with the heavy metal grille of the Jeep, and speeds off wildly into the night.
Wow.
It is only when he reaches the main highway checkpoint an hour later that he finds out his real dad and Martin had actually taken a completely different vehicle from the motor pool that night and were taking a different logging route back to the cabin.
Let's dissect dead blue because it is a profoundly fascinating biological concept.
Please do.
In the natural world, absolute silence does not exist. Forests are incredibly noisy ecosystems. The only time absolute total silence falls over a wilderness area is when a massive, incredibly dangerous apex predator is actively hunting and every other life form, the birds, the insects, the small mammals, has frozen in place to avoid detection.
So it's an alarm bell.
The sudden absence of the natural auditory baseline is a massive physiological trigger for primal dread. The son's brain registers that total silence not as peace, but as an alarm klaxon signaling imminent death.
It's the ultimate confirmation from the environment itself that you are no longer the top of the food chain. But here's the thing. In the woods, in the national park, as terrifying as it is, there is at least a geographic boundary.
You can leave.
You can choose to leave the forest. You can get in a car, drive onto a paved highway, and go back to the concrete and steel of the city. But what happens when the boundary is erased entirely? What happens when the entity crosses into your most intimate, private domestic space? This brings us to our fourth narrative, the ultimate violation.
This is where the psychological toll of horror becomes profoundly traumatic because the foundational concept of sanctuary is not just violated by a broken lock or an open door, it is systematically and impossibly dismantled.
We are looking at a deeply disturbing account from late summer 1991. The tone of this source text is incredibly intimate, heavy, almost mournful. It's an account from an older husband detailing what his late wife endured while they were staying in his father's house.
It starts so ordinarily.
It feels like a normal, quiet night. The wife wakes up in the master bedroom laying on her back. But she quickly realizes she's completely paralyzed. She can't move her arms. She can't turn her head. She can't even open her mouth to speak.
Sleep paralysis.
Her eyes dart frantically around the room, and standing on the husband's side of the bed, towering over him as he sleeps peacefully, is a massive shadow form.
Now, sleep paralysis is a well-documented clinical phenomenon. It occurs when the mind wakes up before the body's REM atonia, which is the natural paralysis that keeps you from acting out your dreams, wears off.
Right.
It is very frequently accompanied by terrifying visual and auditory hallucinations of an intruder in the room. But the narrative of this account immediately pushes past that clinical definition and introduces terrifying anomalies.
Right. Because the wife describes this shadow not as a hazy hallucination, but as undefined, yet completely densely solid. It's blocking out the ambient light from the window. It appears to be wearing the silhouette of a long trench coat and a wide-brimmed fedora, but its face is just a bottomless, textured blackness.
A classic shadow person figure.
It seems to realize the wife is awake and watching, and its attention snaps from the sleeping husband to her. It doesn't walk. It silently, smoothly glides to the foot of the bed, standing over her feet, staring down at her paralyzed body for endless, agonizing moments before floating backward and dissolving out the closed bedroom door.
And then the paralysis breaks.
The absolute second it leaves the room, her paralysis violently breaks. She gasps for air and violently shakes her husband awake. He's skeptical, obviously, chalking it up to a bad nightmare. They turn on a dim bedside lamp to soothe her. But here's where it stops being just a dream.
This is the turning point.
Their large family dog, who was asleep at the foot of the bed the entire time, suddenly wakes up, terrified. It doesn't look at them. It stares directly into the empty, dark corner of the room where the shadow vanished, barking viciously, the hair on its back standing straight up.
The dog sees it.
The husband, trying to calm the situation, reaches out and coaxes the dog back to the center of the bed. They lay back down, trying to settle their racing hearts. And then, without warning, the heavy dog is physically lifted off the mattress into the air and slammed violently down onto the hardwood floor.
Just tossed.
The husband describes the sound and force as being like someone spiked a heavy football. The dog hits the ground, scrambles to its feet, and runs out of the room yelping in pain, hiding under the living room coffee table until morning.
The involvement of the animal is the crucial turning point in this narrative. It provides immediate, external, independent validation of the threat.
It wasn't just in her head.
Exactly. It completely removes the possibility of a solitary internal hallucination caused by sleep paralysis. The physical manipulation of a heavy animal requires mass and force, grounding the ethereal shadow in violent physical reality.
Night 2. They are completely terrified, but they convince themselves it was some freak accident. They lock the bedroom door. They try to sleep. In the dead of night, the shadow entity returns. But this time, the wife isn't paralyzed.
She can move.
She watches in horror as the solid black mass dashes frantically across the bedroom walls, moving fluidly from shadow to shadow like it's hiding within the darkness itself. And then it attacks. It leaps onto the bed and physically pins the wife down.
Oh, God.
She feels the distinct crushing weight of a heavy physical body pressing her into the mattress. She can't breathe. And then she hears a voice. A guttural, vicious, angry growl whispering directly into her ears so close she can feel the vibration. Thanks for the job, babe.
The physical weight on the chest and the hyper-specific conversational auditory whisper entirely bridge the gap between a haunting and a physical assault.
But the absolute climax of this horror happens the next morning. They survive the night, drained, exhausted, and traumatized. They are standing in the hallway, looking into the bedroom. They look at the large bedroom window. This window is on the second floor, 7 feet high on the outside, and the wooden gate leading to that side of the yard is padlocked from the inside.
Completely inaccessible.
In the thick layer of pollen and dust on the outside of the glass, ominous, deeply drawn, arcane sigils have been etched. Harsh, disturbing symbols with sharp angles. Desperate to reclaim their space and their sanity, the husband opens the window, leans out holding his wife's hand for balance, and they wipe the terrifying sigils away with a rag.
Trying to erase the trauma.
In a desperate bid for comfort, they trace simple interlocking hearts in the clean glass instead. They lock the window and leave the room for the day. Hours later, as the sun is setting, they return to the bedroom. The husband hears his wife let out an anguished, soul-crushing wail. He runs in.
And the hearts are gone.
The interlocking hearts they drew have been wiped completely clean. In their place, drawn deep in the dust on the outside of the glass, 7 feet off the ground, is one massive, jaggedly broken heart.
It is a deliberate mocking communication. It requires physical presence on the outside of a second-story window, and it demonstrates a clear, cruel understanding of the couple's emotional state.
I have to ask you about the psychological impact of this. Most of the stories we've discussed today end when you finally achieve distance. You lock the door, you run to the car, you drive away. Here, the door is heavily locked. The window is physically inaccessible, and the entity leaves a literal physical broken heart drawn in the dust. How does the human mind process a threat that entirely defies the established laws of physics?
This circles perfectly back to the neurocinematics of the Estonia study we started with, and the brain's desperate need to render reality. In any normal threat scenario, the brain seeks a point of origin for the fear.
So it can formulate a plan.
Exactly. It desperately wants to rationalize the danger. There is a man at the door, I will lock it. There is a predator in the woods, I will run to the car. If the brain can locate and define the physical parameters of the threat, it can calculate a survival strategy. Run, hide, or fight.
But with the Shadow Man, there's nothing to fight.
The triangulating mechanisms of the brain completely short-circuit and fail.
Because you can't punch a shadow, and you can't build a wall to stop something that glides through locked doors.
Exactly right. When undeniable, brutal physical evidence, the dog being violently thrown to the floor, the crushing weight on the chest, the intricate sigils drawn 7 feet in the air aligns perfectly with an impossible, physics-defying apparition, the brain's logic centers entirely collapse.
You can't categorize it.
It cannot categorize the threat as animal, human, or environmental. And when the primitive brain cannot categorize a threat, it cannot calculate an escape route, which means it cannot turn off the stress response. This causes a prolonged traumatic state of systemic dread rather than a quick, functional spike of fear that helps you survive.
That broken heart.
The broken heart drawn on the window isn't just scary. It is the entity actively proving to the victims that their fundamental understanding of reality is flawed and that they are entirely at its mercy.
Which is truly the most terrifying concept of all. That the physical reality you rely on to keep you safe is not your own.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of manufactured realities, I want to pivot drastically here for our final segment.
Okay.
We spent this entire hour deep in the trenches of visceral, deeply intimate, profoundly human terror. Let's talk about the modern commodification of this exact feeling. Let's talk about the mass production of fear by machines.
The economics of dread. It has become a massive, booming, highly automated industry.
We have a source here, a YouTube tutorial from a creator channel called Zunic AI, and it is a step-by-step, highly cynical masterclass on how people are literally generating massive revenue streams by mass-producing the exact physiological responses we just spent an hour analyzing.
It's wild how optimized it is.
The tutorial breaks it down with chilling efficiency. You don't write a story. You use ChatGPT to generate a script formatted as an untouched police case file. You feed that script into an AI voice generator called DubDub AI, and the tutorial specifically recommends using a synthetic, slightly raspy preset voice named Jason Hollow to maximize the creep factor.
Of course they do.
Then you use an image generator called Leonardo AI to create hyper-realistic, cinematic, dark thumbnails to grab clicks.
It is the complete algorithmic automation of the campfire story. It is removing the human entirely from the tradition of oral storytelling.
They even provide an example of an AI-generated story prompt in the video. Listen to the setup that the machine spit out. A 6-page classified FBI file from Harper's Ferry. A quiet, unassuming accountant's found dead in a basement room locked from the inside.
Classic locked room mystery.
His heart has been liquefied by extreme localized pressure. And the only evidence in the pristine room is a series of bloody handprints arranged in a perfect circle around the body, belonging to a man who forensic records show had been dead for 3 years.
If you look at it structurally, it is a perfectly engineered horror prompt. It mathematically hits all the most effective tropes: the locked room mystery, the grotesque, impossible bodily harm, and the contradictory physical evidence that breaks the brain's pattern recognition.
But I have to push back on this because it feels hollow. Yes, a liquefied heart and a dead man's fingerprints. Mathematically, on paper, that is scary. It hits the tropes. But does a prompt generated by an algorithm, read by a synthetic voice, hit the same deep physiological buttons as the man with missing teeth in the abandoned house? Or the shoe prints leading up to the back of the laptop?
That's the real question.
Does AI actually have the capacity to truly haunt us?
This is where we synthesize everything we've learned today about the biology of fear. The AI is incredibly capable of generating structurally perfect horror because it is trained on vast data sets of what humans have historically found scary. It understands the mechanics of the locked room.
Right.
But the Estonia research proves a fundamental truth about our neurobiology. We are biologically wired for human oral storytelling. We are wired to listen to another human being share a survival account, searching their voice for microtremors, for genuine empathy, for the memory of trauma.
So AI is essentially a synthetic diamond. It has the exact same molecular structure, the locked room, the impossible evidence, but it lacks the microscopic flaws, the organic imperfections of a human actually trembling while they speak, which is what our brains are truly listening for to validate the threat.
That is a phenomenal metaphor. The synthetic diamond is flawless, but it is cold. The reason those Reddit users can fall asleep to those specific YouTube channels is because subconsciously they crave the rhythm, the cadence, and the empathy of human survival sharing.
It's the connection.
AI can mimic the structure of a nightmare flawlessly, but the raw, unexplainable, deeply specific anomalies, the smell of a damp hallway, the exact sickening thud of a dog being slammed to the floor, the bizarre, mocking cruelty of a shadow man drawing a broken heart in the dust, those are the textures of true human trauma. AI generates horror based on a logical understanding of fear. But as we've seen in every narrative today, what truly paralyzes the human mind is when logic violently, unexpectedly falls apart.
The anomalies. The things that just shouldn't be. The things a machine would never think to invent because they defy math.
Okay, let's unpack the immense journey we've walked through today. We started in the suffocating heat of the violated sanctuary of the Airbnb, realizing that the absence of a threat is sometimes just a fragile illusion, shattered by a single dusty footprint behind your chair.
A total collapse of safety.
We hiked deep into the uncanny valley of the abandoned houses, where our evolutionary pattern of survival broke down into a single set of tracks in the wet grass.
Wow.
We climbed 30 feet into the claustrophobia of the park ranger's cabin, discovering that rules only prove the monsters are real, and that the total silence of dead blue is nature's ultimate terrifying warning.
And then the Shadow Man. And we endured the intimate physical violation of the Shadow Man, where the laws of physics shattered alongside a family's peace of mind. We've seen exactly how our brains process fear, burning immense energy to visualize threats, whether whispered by a trembling human voice or synthesized by lines of code.
It is a profound testament to the power of narrative. Our brains are so powerful, so ancient, and so desperate to keep us alive that they will manifest genuine physiological terror from nothing more than words on a screen or a voice in our ear in the dark.
Which brings us to the end of our deep dive into the architecture of dread. But before we leave you, my expert friend has one final thought for you to carry with you tonight.
We've spent this entire time talking about the spaces we feel safe in and how easily that safety can be dismantled. So tonight, when you go home, when you walk around and lock the doors, turn off all the lights, and you finally lay down in your bed, I want you to listen.
Just listen.
Truly listen to the ambient sounds of your sanctuary. The low hum of the refrigerator, the distant, muffled rumble of a car on the street, the wind rattling the glass in the window frame. Listen to the baseline of your safety, and then ask yourself if it all suddenly stops. If the hum dies and the wind fades and you are met with absolute, utter, suffocating silence, is it just a quiet night? Or are you sitting in the middle of dead blue?
Well, on that profoundly unsettling note, I want to enthusiastically thank you for joining us in the dark today. It takes courage to look closely at the things that scare us and to understand the mechanisms of our own minds. Stay curious, keep the lights on if you need to, and we will see you on the next deep dive.